Hey guys, it's Adam from Tested. I am at the Museum of the Moving Image in Queens, New York, about to take a tour through the Jim Henson exhibition. This is a brand new part of their permanent collection. It's a permanent exhibition partially funded by a crowd-funded Kickstarter campaign. It is a compendium of the life of artist, innovator, filmmaker, puppeteer, and ultimately storyteller, Jim Henson. I cannot wait to go through this because there's one thing I'm sure of. This is about a lot more than just puppets. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Adam.
Thank you so much for meeting me today.
Thanks for coming. We're excited.
Oh my God, I can barely wait. Like, my crew's been moving around, making sure we can shoot everywhere, but I have kept my eyes from seeing. So will you lead me through?
Yes, please. Let's go. Let's have a look.
Oh man. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm already like freaking out. This is Jim's actual headband for operating Kermit.
Yeah, so the puppeteers would wear headbands so that they that held a microphone so that they obviously needed their hands free to perform, and that's one that Jim wore often. He had several of them, but that's the one that came to us, so we're really lucky to have it.
No, I grew up looking at those shots from behind the scenes, and this is one of the real Kermits.
Yeah, it's a Kermit from the 70s. So not to destroy anybody's dreams, but there were several Kermits.
Many, right?
But not that many, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, they would. It took a lot to sort of build them and make them right.
Yeah.
And sometimes ones were made that didn't fit the hand quite right, and they had to start again. So it was a
really?
very, very personal sort of process to create the puppet that really had the the right feel for the puppeteer.
And if I remember my reading correctly, like a key part of Kermit's head shape was created by Jim's hand, right?
Exactly, yeah.
He had giant hands.
He had really big hands, and Jim, the association between Jim and Kermit was very, very close, and people sort of identified one to the other.
I do.
Yeah, of course, I think we all do. It's really natural. And what Jim says is that in some ways it was sort of just a natural extension of his hand. There was very little between Kermit and him. It was just this little piece of cloth because his hand basically was the face.
So I have to ask, like, an exhibit like this comes in, you're pulling pieces from all over the world, and I suppose repairing some things and unpacking the history of these things and figuring out how they go. But when Kermit comes in the building, was that in a moment?
Well, it was, the museum received a donation from Jim Henson's family in 2013 of about 500 objects, right?
Yeah.
So it included about 200 historic puppets. So a lot came in at once.
Okay.
But obviously, Kermit, sort of unwrapping Kermit and, getting him sort of ready for exhibition was a particularly kind of amazing moment and, extraordinary process.
I can't imagine. I mean, he's so much part of the moral compass of my childhood is Kermit.
Exactly, right. How many characters are there in the world that have, Kermit was sort of born or built in 1955, essentially.
50?
Yeah, and still has that same kind of resonance with people, has survived, and people kind of know him, right? Despite Jim's passing in 1990 and other puppeteers performing him, there's a sort of a continuity, a consistency to his character that we feel like we know him like almost as a human.
I had no idea Kermit was that much older than me. I really thought he was born with Sesame Street, but no.
Yeah, it was one of the first puppets that Jim made for his first television series, a 5-minute live show, sometimes twice a day, starting in 1955, called Sam and Friends. It was on WORC TV, a local television, NBC affiliate in the DC area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it wasn't a frog yet. Kermit was like a sort of vaguely amphibian creature.
Oh, okay.
He was Kermit. He was not Kermit the Frog. So he sort of acquired the frogness in the early 60s.
Okay, so I don't, this looks like I'm already seeing an embarrassment of riches. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's go this way. Let's talk about Jim's early work for television. So Ralph was the first Muppet star, right? You always think of Kermit being the star.
Yeah. I didn't realize Ralph was the first.
Yeah, Ralph was created for appearing in a dog chow commercial in 1962, and then went on to star in the Jimmy Dean Show, which was a nationally broadcast variety show in the mid-60s. That was hugely popular, and it really was almost like a finishing school for Jim, right? Because we'd go on the show and perform Ralph, actually with Frank Oz performing the right hand of Ralph. It was the first puppet that Frank Oz and Jim Henson performed together, so that's really cool. But Jim learned from the comedy writers on the Jimmy Dean Show,
Right,
and those were guys that had their their backgrounds in vaudeville and in variety shows, and a lot of Jim's sort of comedic sensibility comes from being an apprentice during those years, and just sort of being around that.
How amazing. I didn't realize Ralph was such a lightning rod for that next step.
And this is so great. We have this sketch that Jim made these. I mean, this is one sketch, but there's probably 12 or 15 pages of sketches of dogs that are just a little bit different from each other. And Don Saline, who is his master puppet builder, would look at these sketches, these sort of very rough sketches, and sorry,
well done.
and take what Don would call the essence of a character that would be expressed in Jim's sketch, and make these sort of remarkably expressive puppets out of them. So they were an amazing pair, also. And we try in the exhibition to sort of give shout outs to the various
craftspeople.
Exactly, because they, it wasn't just Jim sort of, standing on a mountain, on his own creating these things. It was this really, really talented group of collaborators, and their commitment to the work was sort of all in. It's a really loyal, talented group of folks. Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
Okay. John Stone was one of the very first people that Joan Gans Cooney, the sort of inventor of Sesame Street, turned to help her, come up with an idea for what Sesame Street would be. So John knew that Jim's work was amazing and would be a perfect fit for Sesame Street. So John Stone brought Jim on to Sesame Street in the sort of infant stage of its development.
Right.
So Jim was not the inventor of Sesame Street, but his puppets became sort of intrinsic,
completely intertwined with the idea. Yeah. And so, how long was the development process of figuring out the first few characters for Sesame Street?
So Jim's characters for Sesame Street were sort of a mix of puppets that he had on hand already that had sort of appeared in other, in other productions, and also characters that he specifically built for the show. So it happened really quick. I mean, it was over the course of a year. Like, he came on board in '68. Sesame Street's on air in 1969. So Bert and Ernie he created for the show. Cookie Monster, Cookie had already been an established sort of cookie or food eating or object eating character from commercials and from industrial films as well. So Cookie came on in that way. But Big Bird here and Oscar the Grouch were built specifically for Sesame Street, for the street itself. Because the producers were, first the idea was that the puppets would only exist in their sort of interstitials, right? And that the action on the street would just be people. But during focus groups, the kids quickly lost interest in the puppetless segment, so they knew they had to get the puppets on the street. So in order to do that in a seamless way that didn't require a baffle for the puppeteer to go behind, Jim created a walk-around, which we had walk-around puppets in the past, the LaToy Dragon, these commercials that he made. So he created a walk-around puppet of Big Bird that could just sort of exist, without having to hide behind anything, and Oscar the Grouch that could, the trash can was basically his thing that he could hide behind. So then those two puppets sort of became real part of the street.
And at this point, Kermit seems to be fully formed. He seems to be the full Kermit the Frog with the eyes we know and the form.
That happened, I would say, like from the mid-'60s to the end of the '60s, Kermit kind of
slowly
achieved
grew up.
his final form. There were some differences in the number of points on his collar, but essentially Kermit was Kermit, and he was part of Sesame Street in the beginning, and then kind of pulled back eventually, and Kermit went on to other things.
So I'm looking at standing in front of a full-size Big Bird. It's sort of shocking how much larger his head is than I somehow expected. And I'm wondering if, as you were loading these pieces in, was there a specific surprise where you're like, oh wow, I totally didn't realize that was like that?
I mean, just the mass of Big Bird is kind of amazing. His tail goes really far back, so we had to deal with things like, is the platform going to be big enough? Are our ceilings high enough? This was sort of the only space in the gallery that we had that could really accommodate Big Bird.
And this is Carol Spinney, right, with the right hand here and the left hand here.
Exactly. Yeah. The performance that he did really up until, he really only just retired and he's in his 80s, the physical demands of performing this. So he had to wear this harness over here.
Oh, this was his original, oh my goodness,
yeah, so he had to wear this harness over, his chest, so so that he could watch a monitor, so he could watch himself perform.
So he is actually also watching the monitor.
Oh
that the other
yeah.
puppeteer-
Otherwise, how could he see? Right, his eyes aren't up in the eyes, and there's no holes in the bird's body.
So this is a camera signal fed to him. So.
Exactly. So he could see what's going on outside, and he could see where he's going, right? And so he's watching that. He's performing the bird, and he's reading from a script taped into the bird's body. What? How do you do that?
I don't know how you do that.
And roller skate often.
What?
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure I have known in the longest time that Big Bird had a big tail.
Yeah, it's a big tail. Yeah. So this is a section we call the Muppets for obvious reasons, and we wanted to really make it feel like an explosion, right?
Right.
We wanted people to understand that it was important without having to say this is important. So this projection of all 120 episodes of the Muppet Show playing at once is this sort of gesture that really communicates that excitement and that sort of significance. Because the Muppet Show was something that Jim had wanted to get off the ground since 1960. So it was a project he was trying to get going for 15 years.
And it came off the ground in 1980, right?
1976.
76. Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it was. This was my childhood, right? We watched this every week as it came out. I probably watched every single one of these episodes 3 or 4 times in my childhood.
Yeah, they're really, really magical and still hold up. I mean, they're just hilarious and charming and fun.
And this is also part of the improvisational aspect of the troupe. Like they were writing scripts every week for this show, and also developing new characters every week at the same time. So the shop is going full bore.
Exactly.
It's an amazing.
Well,
amount.
they had to move. They had to create sort of a company and operations in England because, sort of amazingly enough, none of the U.S. networks wanted the Muppet Show. Right. So Jim wound up making 2 pilots for ABC. Thinking that ABC was going to pick it up. They didn't, and then pitched it to CBS. This is a pitch reel, a hilarious pitch reel he made for CBS. CBS said no, thank you. But Lou Grade in London said, really saw the potential of it. And Muppet Show wound up being produced in London for the 5 years where it was made. And because it was produced for syndication, it went worldwide right away.
Oh,
so
okay.
So it was almost more popular in other countries at first than it was in the U.S.
I had no idea. I remember reading at some point it was an extremely expensive show to produce.
I guess. I mean, there was sort of a lot to do. The guest hosts and those logistics. It took a lot of people to put this show on, so they had to build a whole shop in London to be able to. To be able to make all this stuff happen, and yet, still the New York office was still going and doing things. So that
doing commercials
really,
and other
and
Sesame Street, of course.
Street.
Right.
So Jim and Frank and others would fly back.
Oh my God! Of course, they're doing the Muppet Show and Sesame Street.
And Sesame Street at the same time. I mean, that was an amazing thing for me that sort of clicked at some point. That Jim and Frank, especially, how busy they were doing so many different projects. To Sesame Street, would fly back to New York and still be Bert and Ernie, like into the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, so I see one of my favorites, the Swedish chef, who had real hands.
Well, yes, that's really interesting. So the Swedish chef had real hands. It was what is called a live hand puppet. Like Ralph is also a live hand puppet, right? And so it took 2 puppeteers.
And Cookie Monster as well.
Exactly.
Right?
So the main puppeteer's right hand in the mouth, left hand in one of the hands, and then a second puppeteer doing the puppet's right hand. What was different about the Swedish chef is that because he had so many things to manipulate, and because there was no fur covering his hands, Jim and Frank performed it together, and it was Frank's hands in both his 2 hands.
Both his hands.
And Jim doing the mouth. So here's this crazy picture that shows you the sort of gymnastics of what they had to do to make this puppet happen.
Wow.
Then we had the challenge in, how do we exhibit the Swedish chef? Because there's no fur covering it. Do we leave them empty? That's kind of weird. It looks like they're amputated. Yeah. So Frank Oz generously allowed us to cast.
I was wondering. That's the best. That was my first question.
Yeah.
That's the best that you're actually using Frank's hands.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
And the distension, that's what made me think these must be the real hands.
Yeah, because they don't look natural.
They
right?
don't. They're the Swedish chef. They're stretched and torqued.
Yeah.
It's lovely too when you get up close to these, when you see how simple the construction is. I mean, how innovatively they solved the problem. This is just mattress foam.
Yeah.
As open cell urethane foam, carved intricately, but the structure is very simple.
Yeah, the design and the structures were, really, really carefully thought through. I mean, these weren't just people sort of making cute things out of flashy fabrics. The builders, the designers, really come from these sort of amazing places where they had these fantastic skills. Actually, it's a great story with Dave Goelz, who achieved fame through the Muppets. He's Gonzo and he's Zoot and
Dr. Bunsen Honeydew.
Exactly, all these other characters. So Dave was working as an industrial designer for Hewlett-Packard in California, and was an adult in his 20s and happened to catch part of Sesame Street and saw Bert and Ernie and was just so taken with the design of the characters and how their personalities sort of matched the way they were constructed that he was like, that's what I need to be part of. So he built his own Ernie and came to New York and figured out how to reach Jim. Jim was not so hard to reach. He would talk to people, you know?
Yeah.
And Jim's like, yeah, sure, you can come and work for us. So he started building puppets and then was drafted into performing. Sort of against his will, but it's a good thing he was.
Fascinating. I know Dave, and he told me about performing Gonzo for the first season of the Muppet Show, and then realizing he wanted more, and so he added the eye mechanism to Gonzo to deepen the character for the second season.
Right.
And I loved hearing the fact that this was an ongoing process of character development and construction technique and design and implementation.
Right. Yeah.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah. Often the builders would also have their hands in performing, so it wasn't like a factory situation. You know what I mean?
Not a cast system.
Really understood what it took to be able to make these characters come alive and refine them over time.
So I'm looking at the Muppet Show openings behind you.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember in 1976 my family getting excited about the premiere and us sitting down and watching it on the night. I can't remember what night of the week it was, but I remember watching it and talking about it the next day at school.
Yeah. I love when they all line up, the openings line up. It's great. And there's Gonzo.
The misunderstood performance artist of the Muppets.
And if we turn the corner, we'll see the actual Muppet Sign.
Wow.
We were kind of beyond excited when the archivist of the Henson Company, Karen Falk, who's amazing.
Yeah.
One day she was like, we've got you want to see the Muppet Show sign? We've got it here in the archives. Because we borrow a lot of the material in the exhibition is borrowed from the Jim Henson Company archives. The puppets are the museums. They're ours, but a lot of the sort of process material is part of the archive. So Karen just took out this sign, and we were like, okay.
And
yes, please.
Is this one of the original sketches?
Yes, it's a design sketch by Michael Frith for the sign, and then this is sort of a storyboard for the opening segment.
Wow, it's so great. They saved all this stuff so we can really see how it was developed.
Yeah. Another thing they saved, which was really fortuitous, was bankers boxes upon bankers boxes, etc., of fan mail that came in. And what we wanted to do was sort of attest to Jim's vision to make a show that wasn't just for kids. It was really for families. It was for people of all ages. So we just sort of randomly started picking out letters to show the diversity of ages of people that sort of wrote in and said like,
and were inspired and
inspired. Yeah.
Now behind I see here.
Yes, the fabulous Miss Piggy in all her glory.
She's amazing.
She is.
Wow.
She'd be the first to agree with you.
She looks beautiful.
So that's Miss Piggy in her dress from the Muppets Take Manhattan. And it was really the movies that made her into sort of a star, into a big star and a fashion icon. I mean, it's the truth, and she sort of remains a fashion icon, which is sort of crazy. But it wasn't one person making. I mean, Bonnie Erickson was the designer and builder of the first Miss Piggy, but it was obviously Frank's performance, and it was Michael Frith being an art director that created the calendars that showed her in all these elaborate costumes, and the costume designers, Callista Hendrickson, Barbara Davis, that supplied the wardrobe. So again, it's these sort of amazingly talented, creative folks that Jim sort of trusted to be able to sort of bring his characters to life.
I love the fact that Jim and Frank built Ernie and Bert and Kermit and Miss Piggy. I mean, it must have been fascinating for them as performers to find these relationships and different relationships and different characters in the way they relate to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. It was sort of a chemistry, between two performers that is really up there in the amazing pairs of folks on the screen.
Truly.
Even though you don't see them on the screen, you see their characters on the screen.
There was a documentary years ago that showed Jim and Frank on Sesame Street set improvising as Ernie and Bert.
Yeah.
And I remember I watched it dozens of times because it was so inspiring watching them find these characters and explore them.
Right, exactly. And you just saw how much fun they were having too.
Right.
And that's something that keeps coming up because people are always asking, like what makes this stuff so special, and how are these characters so long lasting? And an answer that a lot of the people that worked on with Jim and on these characters say is just that they were having so much fun. Their love of the projects, the characters, the puppets, the stories was really informed their performances and their work.
Dave Goelz told me that Jim would just take the time to get the scene right. That he would keep on shooting until everyone felt like there was a performance that really mattered going on. And he was like, never again after Jim, if I felt like that total amount of, we're just here to get this right. And Jim really created that space, he said, that allowed them to spend that time.
Yeah, because it was technically really demanding. I mean, it wasn't just like knowing lines. Frank Oz was here at the museum recently and told this story, and I forget where he was, but there was some show that they were doing. Maybe it was a live show or something on TV where there were sort of mostly human characters, and he and Jim were sort of waiting in the wings to go on with their puppets, and someone turned to them and said, "You guys look like surgeons. Like your concentration is so focused, because they." They're not just like saunter on and be their personalities. Like they have to make these other things come to life, and those other things depend on them for their life. So they're really attuned, in a very strong way.
Well, in that physical demand, I'm looking at this architectural model over here that I find really fascinating. This is an example of how they had to work if they were doing a scene. You'd have the puppeteers under here with the Muppets up front.
Exactly. So starting for the Muppet Show, they wound up sort of building these sets that allowed for these false floors, so the puppeteers had space to be, instead of having to be. I mean, a lot of times they had to be curled up inside something crazy to be able to perform. We love the set model because it shows what it sort of took, and that there's puppets on top and people actually doing it, and that there's monitors here
so
too,
they can see what the camera sees.
Yeah.
I mean, and every time they are having to perform basically backwards. They're looking at a camera that's showing them.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So again, the canvas keeps getting bigger. So the Muppet movies bring the Muppets to the big screen, and then the three projects that we focused on in this section, Fraggle Rock, Dark Crystal, and Labyrinth, are these fully integrated imaginary worlds, right? So there's no sort of reference to the real world in them, right? Jim wanted to sort of, use the full force of his imagination and the imagination of his collaborators to just invent something new. So with Fraggle Rock, he knew he had the audience out there internationally with the international versions of Sesame Street, and the Muppet Show was all over the world. So he knew that he had the attention of the world, and really felt like he had the responsibility to use that attention in a way that would help things, right? So he, very consciously wanted to develop Fraggle Rock as something that would help bring peace between different kinds of people. So the three groups in Fraggle Rock, the Gorgs, the Fraggles, and the Doozers, are all sort of in their own universes, and they're very, very different, but they're interdependent. And it sounds almost naive, but with Jim Henson, it's not.
No,
he really believed this, and it wound up being this tremendously successful show.
Incredible.
Maybe it did make the world a little better.
By definition, because we can enjoy Jim even decades later and understand how beautiful this vision was.
And again, the technology, right? So always pushing the limits of technology. So we have a little clip there that shows what it sort of took to be able to control these Gorgs. Obviously, it was humans walking around in these giant puppets, but their expressions were controlled remotely.
Oh, by puppeteers who weren't in the costume.
Exactly. So you see there's Jerry Nelson using what they called a Waldo to control the puppets Muppets' faces through radio control. And they did the same for the tiny little Doozers, because you couldn't get a puppeteer's hand in them, obviously. Right. But you could, sort of operate the sort of gross motor skills through these little fish, like things, these mechanisms. But the really subtle facial expressions on them were also produced remotely through these.
Oh, separately from them. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because they were really subtle. I mean, if you look at their faces, they're talking. I mean, they're moving their lips. And they're tiny. I mean, they're really, really tiny. But they have these little mechs in there that would move. And Kathy Mullen is on the screen there sort of demonstrating how it worked.
And to be clear, this was this absolute state of the art, like in terms of animatronic movement and character building.
Exactly.
They were at the absolute edge of the technology for
and
this.
a lot of that was developed during the production of the Dark Crystal. So Dark Crystal came out in '82. So a lot of that development happened in '81. They in the Dark Crystal they used a combination of like cables and pulleys, and then as the production went on and they felt like they needed more subtle controls, that kind of radio control technology developed, and then they applied it to Fraggle Rock. So they sometimes jokingly say, that the Dark Crystal was like a millions of dollars rehearsal basically for Fraggle Rock, because then they got to apply the technology there.
And we're better for it.
Yeah. So then we move on to some iconic, amazing costumes from Labyrinth.
Look at that.
Where sort of people take center stage in a way, right? So it's the characters of Sarah and Jareth that are the main focus in Labyrinth, but they're surrounded by all these magical puppet characters again in this fully sort of
realized world.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Incredible. I love looking at costumes like this close up. It's just the amount of extra detail in there that is implied on screen and is part of the veracity of the world. Up close, it gets even better.
Well, I think working at the museum with a lot of different makers, I think what you find is a common theme between people's work that is really, really brilliant is that they do much more than is necessary. That the attention to detail is more than anyone will ever sort of notice, but it communicates somehow.
It's all coming out to you.
Yeah.
As a complete world.
We have this fantastic Skeksis puppet.
Look at him.
So we could have a sort of a proper stage.
This is the Chamberlain, right?
This is the Ritual Master.
Oh, okay.
And this was the one that was performed by Jim.
Oh, wow.
And again, he's working with really. This is the early. I mean, think of it, right? The Muppet movies are coming out, but Dark Crystal's coming out at the same time. So there's so much going on. So much going on. And working in foam latex was a fairly new medium for them, right? So they'd been working with these fabric puppets for the Muppet Show, for Sesame Street, for all these different projects.
A lot more additive building technology using foam and carving it down instead of making castings and molding.
Yes, this was a really, really different kind of way of creating the puppets and also creating the characters, right? So those things are always sort of together, and for a lot of the Dark Crystal characters, there's sort of an underneath layer under the foam latex that provides the mechanism. So these are the hands,
extended fingers,
exactly, that the puppeteers could operate, and then the foam latex hands would sort of slip over them.
And I love this is just plywood. These are plywood clevis joints with cable operation. The mechanics are so simple and yet so robust.
Yeah.
That's great.
And similarly, Jen and Kira, our heroes in the Dark Crystal, had these sort of mechanized resin layers under their foam latex heads that operated everything, and maybe a little weird to look at. They're sort of skinless faces, but it's how it all worked.
In a day of Arduino-controlled bots being relatively trivial for people to assemble and construct, this is again at the absolute edge of the possible.
They were making it up
at that point in time.
Making it up. Yeah, they were totally just making it up. Yeah.
These are the most ancient RC rigs that I've ever seen. Wow. And they've got plywood cutouts to control the level of movement for some of the actions in there.
And annotating kind of what did what, so people would know.
Wow. And then the linkage between the two that clearly added some relationship in terms of facial movement. And these servos going to cable drives. Wow. It's just gorgeous.
So, we didn't want to end the exhibition with just like, he made these big films, and then sadly, he passed away in 1990. We really wanted to give people the the feeling that he was just constantly working, constantly doing 100 different things.
Innovating, iterating.
Right, exactly. Some things that worked, some things that didn't, but always kind of pushing the envelope, always sort of involved in making things and making new things. So this final sort of short section is just about the number of projects that he was working on in the late 80s, really up until 1990 when he passed away. And they include the Storyteller, which was featured on Jim Henson Hour and also in other ways. The creation of the first digital puppet, fully digital puppet, Waldo C. Graphic, and there's some sketches.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, so that was, he's really, again, looking forward to using digital technology and starting to make real headway in that area.
And so even though he starts with the simplest cloth puppets, he's not shying away from the technology. At any point in this process, he's bringing it in,
Absolutely.
using it, pushing it to the edge of its possibility for storytelling, and affecting whole other swaths of the film industry with that technology too.
Exactly, yeah. So it's this real kind of interesting dichotomy between the simplicity and the complexity behind it. I mean, he wanted the stories to feel really simple. He didn't want you to be distracted by the technology, but he was going to worry about it. He didn't want you as a viewer to worry about it. And then his company, after he passed away in 1990, his company went on and were real innovators in digital puppetry with the shows that they still make. So that's sort of wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's
and then
so inspiring.
at the very end, we wanted to create sort of just a nod, just sort of a wrapping up moment that shows, I think I said earlier that he created this company of puppets, but what we're also talking about in the exhibition is this company of people,
right?
And they sort of exist on parallel lines.
A culture.
Yeah. So we wanted to really sort of highlight the people and the puppet characters, the two sets of characters that were involved, and not create a shrine, but really give you a moment to sort of kind of meditate on what he left behind.
That's really lovely. I mean, there's so much joy extant in every part of the process, from the first puppets to the company to the stories to the songs, the celebration.
Yeah, we want to inspire people walking through here. I mean, we feel a commitment to our visitors, and education is at the heart of the mission of the museum. So we want to entertain folks, but we really want them to sort of walk away feeling inspired to go out and do their thing. From Jim's example and the example of the people that he worked with, to sort of do their best and throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks for them.
Achievement unlocked, Barbara. This has been an absolute fantasy of an exhibit to come and see.
It's
really
great to have you here. It's fun.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure.